Is Nintendo Online worth it? As much as I would like to give an absolutely definitive answer to that question, the real answer is it depends on who you ask. So there are three groups of people that would give you three different answers to that question. First is the nostalgics, second is the realists, and third are the pirates. These people either love Nintendo Online, or they hate Nintendo Online, or they may just have a completely different answer. Before we explore the different groups, this video is brought to you by Will Woodworking and Laser Engraving. Choose from a variety of cups including tumblers, beverage holders, pints, pilsners, wine tumblers, water bottles, and ring necks, as well as cutting boards. I got my own merch with the Dadimer logo engraved on it, and when you purchase $35 or more, use the code Dadimer10 and you will get $10 off your order. Now is the time to start thinking about holiday gifts, and what better way to kick things off with a customized cup from Will Woodworking and Laser Engraving. Help the channel out by helping them. Link in the description below, and now, let's get into the groups. Group 1, the nostalgics. You were born in the 80s or the 90s. You grew up on NES, you grew up on SNES, you grew up on Sega Genesis, you grew up on N64, and these consoles and the games have you locked in. Someone says GoldenEye on the N64, and you perk your head up and you're ready to go with a Nintendo controller, ready to go to town on someone, taking into consideration how poorly the games have aged. But it doesn't matter, because these games are your games. What makes Nintendo Online worth it for you is that you don't have to dig out your Nintendo 64 out of your mom's basement collecting dust. Just blowing the cartridge, even though apparently that was not good for the console to do that, or the games, but pre-internet age, that seemed to catch on. You get to play these classic games on the go. You get to play them in bed before you go to sleep. Or you get to play them with your children or play them with your nieces and nephews that are too young to even know what a Nintendo 64 or an NES even is. You can be Christina Aguilera with her kids, playing with her kids while on tour. You can be Brie Larson between all the marvelous movies she puts out. You pretty much eat anything up that Nintendo puts out and has to offer, because it is a well-established company, and most of us are just locked into the brand. Group number 2 is the realists. Realists may include qualities of the previous group I just mentioned, but you know this company by now. Nintendo is going to Nintendo. And for those of you who do not know what that means, it basically means that there is absolutely no predicting what Nintendo is going to do. Are they going to have a direct around E3 this year, despite them normally having one? No. Are they going to announce a new Metroid game out of the blue and not give us much info a few years later? Yes. Are they going to take something that used to be free and then start charging for it? And, why not throw in some Nintendo games for good measure? Kind of like NFL Plus, if you think about it. To the realist, they see what Nintendo used to do. They used to offer games on sale for individual purchase. Did you lose your Game Boy Advance and want to catch up before you played Metroid Dread? Great. Just make sure you have your Wii U out and buy Metroid Fusion for a few bucks. Gotta play Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask for, say the 20th time? Then great, go buy them individually and enjoy them to your heart's content. Enter the Switch, released in 2017. Online was free, presumably because they weren't prepared to deal with the whole online thing, and they weren't prepared for the massive success that the Switch was destined to become. You could purchase these games on the somewhat barren eShop at the time, but there was no retro games at the time, but then a year later they started coming out and charging $20 a year for it in order to play Mario Kart, Smash, and Splatoon 2 online. In addition, they also threw in NES games. They had a new game every single month. and they had the usual suspects. They had Mario 1, 2, and 3. They had Legend of Zelda, Adventure of Link, and then some of the games I'd never even heard of before. Then they added Super Nintendo a year later with those usual suspects. You had A Link to the Past, you had Donkey Kong Country, you had Super Metroid, and with one little caveat. They didn't feed us consistent games every single month like they used to with the NES. Instead, their feed with the Super Nintendo games was a little spotty, to say the best, when they would add games to the new service. On top of that, the more time went by, the quality of the games that appeared on the SNES service dipped harder than the last few seconds of most YouTube videos. Like, Claymates? Like, what the heck is that? Like, Spawnwave and RGT85 were joking and said they were selecting games by just using a dartboard. No Final Fantasy VI. I understand Nintendo if you had licensing issues at the time, but, I understand maybe with Chrono Trigger if you couldn't get that on there, but I know you had Final Fantasy VI on the SNES Classic, and that wasn't on the Nintendo Switch Online. Maybe they didn't want to cannibalize sales of the NES or SNES Classic, but they also had committed to releasing games, so what are they to do? Last year, they released N64 into the fray, possibly to satisfy consumer demand, and this is a long shot on this theory, but maybe to slow down emulation? Nintendo has had one of the greatest back catalogs, but for some reason, they don't want to make that back catalog available for individual purchase because they run a Disney Vault strategy for selling their games. Because of this, people find ways of getting games for free. Microsoft, if you're listening, please show Nintendo how to do a back catalog. I'm sure Nintendo can learn a lot from you guys, and we Nintendo customers would be very, very grateful. Nintendo definitely showed where they truly valued their services when they increased the price from $20 a year to $50 a year, and that made headlines. Sure, it added some value by adding Sega Genesis games, Animal Crossing DLC, Mario Kart DLC, but they were not giving these games to you all at once. Instead, they were drip-feeding you games and road mapping their service. Further, while offering these games, they also sold wireless N64 controllers, which is the optimal way to play, but they also got scalped in less than an hour of them going on sale, meaning those who either don't want one or can't buy one are left with the Joy-Cons or the Pro controllers, which were not optimized at the time for the ideal button layout for modern controls. And I believe, and correct me on this if I'm wrong, but out of the gate, you couldn't map the buttons to your playstyle either. I imagine this was a move to sell N64 controllers. Meanwhile, gone is the ability to purchase individual games from the Wii U. Time to give that up, eBay resellers. You're done. Purely in a money aspect, you could consider this move a good move on Nintendo, so congrats, guys. You're making revenue off of the same product and teasing us about more upcoming games. So good for you. From a consumer perspective, however, this is really frustrating. Why would I want to pay a higher price for you to tease me with N64 games a month? And sometimes you're not even dropping games every single month. Sure, you have the classics on there, like GoldenEye, who, oddly enough, is getting multiplayer on Switch, but not on Xbox. Weird. Speaking of Xbox, each major company's offerings between Nintendo Online, PlayStation Plus, Xbox Game Pass, what of these do you objectively think is the best overall service? Personally, I don't even own an Xbox or a PC, and to me, from what I've seen, I kind of think Game Pass is the best one. I kind of think Game Pass takes the cake, just purely based off what I've seen. Sound off in the comments what service you think is the best. And due to the focus on the N64, even less of a focus was on SNES games and NES. I think Nintendo thought by distracting us with the N64 games that they thought they could blind us to the fact that they weren't releasing SNES games in quite a while. Group number 3 is the Pirates.
We are the pirates, so don't do anything. We just stay at home and lie around.
And I say pirates because this group is hooked on sales. This group of people has no problem getting their games secondhand. Those of you who are not dads watching this channel, I promise this is the last joke like that. These guys have no problem getting their games secondhand, cheap, or through ROMs, which they totally already own, and just want to make life a little easier. The biggest thing about this group is that they can acknowledge the nostalgic's point of view, the realist point of view, and ultimately it doesn't matter all that much because you know that Nintendo also offers a family plan for its service. Previously $35 with the NES and the SNES, now $50 a year. Now $80 a year for the addition of the N64 and the DLC options, which means that your $50 that you would spend, or your $80 that you would spend for a family plan is actually no longer that price. For you, it is $10 a year, or 83 cents a month. So you can acknowledge the good, you can acknowledge the bad, and then when you really think about the 83 cent a month investment, it doesn't really matter all that much. Or you can become a gaming YouTuber and have Google pay for it all after you qualify. So which group do you fall into? Do you fall into the group that loves everything Nintendo does? Do you fall into the group that hates what Nintendo is doing and holds back what could be Nintendo's greatest console of all time, but it's not due to their online service? Personally, I'm mostly a pirate. I share a family plan with 6 other coworkers from my last job, and I do think it's kind of dirty of them to drip feed games and do the roadmap just very little at a time. But I do also enjoy playing these classics, and I do play Mario Kart DLC, and I let my wife kick my butt when it releases. Actually, I'm not gonna lie, she does destroy me in Mario Kart, but that's between you and me. So let me know in the comments below, what group do you fall into? Maybe there's a group that I didn't even mention here. These are just the groups that I thought of with the different types of answers that would answer this question. For other game discussions and topics, watch the video set I have right here. I have thoughts on the latest PS5. You can also at me on Twitter, and you can find me at the Datimer. A like in the video helps me to know what videos to put out, and a subscribe tells YouTube and me that I know that I'm doing a good job entertaining you. I try to treat this channel like my house, and I always want you to feel welcomed and enjoy yourself in my house. So until the next video, go spend time with your families, go ace that next test, and go throw touchdowns before playing Call of Duty. If you don't know what I'm talking about, well, that is a cardinal sin. Well, I'll see you in the next one.